Welcome to the Costa Property Podcast, the podcast that turns your dreams of owning a piece of paradise on the Costa del Sol into reality. I'm Warner Laurie, and I'm joined by my co-host and wife, Sandra Laurie.
Join us as we embark on navigating the ins and outs of real estate and relocation to this beautiful region.
We're not just about market trends, we're about sharing real-life experiences, because we know the struggle firsthand, and I've helped many people navigate this challenge also.
If you're dreaming of your perfect Costa del Sol home and want to get real, no-frills, expert advice, then you're absolutely in the right place. Join us each week as we share honest insights and information that will guide your journey. So if you're dreaming of moving to Spain but find yourself thinking, that's great, I'd love to go and live in a sunny climate, but I'd have to give up my career that I've worked so hard to build, my career that I have dedicated so much of my time and energy to establish. I'd have to give all that up. Then this episode is for you, because here's the truth. I didn't come to Spain with a job lined up. I wasn't fluent in Spanish, and I definitely didn't have all the answers or have everything figured out. But I still managed to build a career, a C-level career, here in Spain, a career superior to what I had been able to build thus far in my time in Ireland. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you how I did it, what I wish I had known sooner, and one surprising thing that you probably don't know about how I actually got started. I promise you, if I can do it, so can you. I felt, compelled to talk to you more about my own story in terms of building my career in Spain. I wanted to talk about where it all started. I wasn't always working in the real estate space with Warner. That's quite new, actually, in the last 2 to 3 years. And when I first moved to Spain in 2016, I had a corporate career, an international corporate career that required me to travel to exciting locations every month. It required a lot of my time and focus, and I loved it. I loved the razzmatazz of it. I loved how it made me feel. I loved that I got to learn so many new skills in an international environment. I loved that I got exposed to different cultures, scenarios that I never would have been able to back in Ireland. And I want to talk to you more about how I managed to build that career and what my life looks like from 2016 to 2022 while I was building that senior C-level career over here in Spain. It's fair to say that when I first moved to Spain, or was building my plan to make that move to Spain, I had so many concerns around my career. How was I going to build it? I didn't speak the language. I was really concerned about being able to build a career as serious to the one that I had been able to build in my time in Ireland. And this was really priority for me, because so much of my identity, so much of my internal identity was connected to my career and doing well in my career. That looks like, getting a promotion every year, being lined up for the next senior role. I wanted to really reach a very high level of my career, and I was concerned that moving to Spain would wipe that out. So I actually at the time had decided to train as a makeup artist before I was coming to Spain as a plan B, actually. Actually, I haven't said that out loud in quite a while, because I was worried that I wouldn't be able to build up that career. And I said, look, worst case scenario, I will learn how to do makeup really well, and I can start to work the wedding circuit scene in Spain. It wasn't really like a dream in terms of like my dream career. I've always loved makeup, but I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do it on other people. But the way I was looking at it at the time was I wasn't sure. I didn't have the confidence while we were planning our move that I was going to be able to get that corporate career that I'd had in Ireland, and I needed to have a plan B. Anyway, I set myself a goal. I set myself kind of a research goal that I was going to start researching companies in Spain along the Costa del Sol that potentially my skill sets were a match for. And I became obsessed with this. I became obsessed with searching job sites like Indeed. I became obsessed with what companies that were in the area that hired international employees, that you didn't necessarily only need to speak Spanish. And this just became front of mind and my mission. And I learned a lot. I learned that in that period of 2016, Malaga was starting to re-establish itself as a very serious hub for employment, a tech hub. And a lot of companies were choosing to base their European base close to Malaga Airport. And there was a lot of investment both from the local governments, but from different multinational companies coming into the Malaga area. I think companies started to realise that Malaga and the Costa del Sol in terms of an employment base was sensible, because so many nationalities were choosing to base themselves along the Costa del Sol. And yes, the total natural answer is that labour costs were cheaper. So you were usually able to get a multilingual employee for a lower cost than your home country, which enabled the labour costs for companies to be cheaper than potentially their home country. So concepts like nearshoring were very, very popular in Spain. And I became very interested in this and realised, okay, this nearshoring concept, this really matches my skill set. I had a lot of customer service-based experience. I had qualifications in HR management. I had a lot of operational experience in terms of scaling businesses and winding them down. I had closed companies before redundancies. So I realised that I had great skill sets to match this nearshoring concept. And actually, I started to realise I might actually be able to build a very serious career in Spain in the same way that I'd had in Ireland. So I started to go about my business to shortlist companies that I felt could be interesting for me and that I could be an interesting profile for them. I started to really find the job sites that were working for me and that seemed to have the most traffic. And I started to just apply for jobs. Of course, that niggle was constantly in the back of my head. I don't speak Spanish. Yes, I've had a senior director level career, but I don't speak the language and I don't necessarily have the experience managing cross-culturally. So there was a bit of an inner critic narrative going on there. But you know what? I did it. I said, shut up, inner critic voice. I've got a lot of skill sets here that could be really interesting for these companies. And I started to apply for roles. So a few days passed, a few weeks passed. Nothing happened. I started to apply for more roles and I was persistent with contacting the recruiters, with making that personal contact, and I consistently applied for roles. So I made it part of my day and part of my mission. And persistence beats resistance, and eventually I started to get replies back. And then I started to get multiple replies back. And these replies back were from serious companies. They were from serious companies that had international footprints and they had bases in Malaga, and they started to realise that my skill sets could be a match for them. So I then started to go through screening interviews online, because I was very much in the late stages of our move here. So I would have been packing boxes around and getting ready to go. And I was taking those initial screening and video interviews with the recruiters who were based in Spain while I was based in Ireland. And it started to go well. I guess we built these things up that recruitment processes in Spain are potentially going to be different than they are in Ireland. Look, they are different in terms of the practicalities. Questioning might be different around what languages do you speak, all of those type of elements. But the overall structure of the recruitment process, the selection process, the matching process, maybe aptitude testing, screening, all of those components were very much the same. So my confidence started to build then when I realised, okay, although the recruiter is sitting in a different country, the components of this are more or less the same. And girl, this is your area. You've interviewed thousands of people in your lifetime and you're well able to navigate yourself through an interview. So hold your confidence and get through it. So long story short, got through that process, did the initial screening with a couple of companies before I got to Spain, came over to Spain, and while we were doing the early days of integrating into Spain, kids' schools, settling into a new home, I was actually in probably then the late stages of interviews with some serious companies. And these were great companies, great names that were internationally recognized. And I started to feel really excited. I started to see the light and the glimmer of hope that this could be possible for me. I really might be able to establish myself and build a good career over here. So got through those processes and then started to get to the later stages, meet with different key stakeholders that I would potentially be working with. And a job offer came, a good job offer. So that was exciting. And I actually accepted the initial job offer. It wasn't a role as senior to what I potentially been used to back in Ireland, but it was a good, serious role with a solid fixed contract. And I guess that's the thing over here in Spain. Everybody's on the chase for having a fixed contract because you want to get into the system. You want to start building up your credibility as an employee. You want to start contributing to your pension pots. You want to start contributing to social security. You want to be building up all those things that are really important to grow your life in Spain. So I accepted that role, and then lo and behold, a second job offer came. Now, the second job offer was the one that I wanted. Okay, it was the role that I had felt in my heart. This is a great match for me from a skill set point of view. It was within the BPO sector in space and in nearshore industry. I had a lot of experience in that sector. That sector was kind of in my blood. I knew how to manage clients in that sector. I knew how to build teams and drive teams. So that was the role that I wanted. So I made a decision after discussing everything with Warner that I was actually going to proceed with the second role. And then I actually declined the offer from the first company. Excellent, agreed my start date, starting to go through my induction process, was really impressed with my experience with that company. I was working with a phenomenal recruiter who you'll meet in this series at some point. She's going to be here to help us understand how to actually practically tackle our job searches. I had a great experience, built a great relationship with her, went in, started the role. And the interesting part for me is that when I went in to start the role, I thought, this is me now. I have this in the bag. This is where I'm good. Teams gravitate to me quickly. I know operations. I know how to take the next steps naturally. I had been given a very clear brief of some of the priorities and challenges that I was to deal with straight away. So I felt like I've got this. But what I didn't know, that would actually be the hardest part. Why? Because fair enough, I was going into an environment that was an international environment, so the business language was English. But what I massively underestimated was the skills that I needed that I didn't possess to manage different cultures. So within the team that I was managing, there was about 9 different nationalities. And I had no experience of that. I had mainly managed UK or Irish nationals. I had some experience with the American market from a client management perspective, but I had not managed teams that had such a culturally diverse mix. And this tested me to my core. Why? Because I didn't have the skills at the time to really observe that the communication that was being given to me from the teams was completely different to what I had been used to. So I had no experience with low context, high context communication. I had no experience with the different traditions culturally, how hierarchy was viewed. It was all completely new to me, and I made a lot of mistakes, and it really, really massively challenged me. I had massive wobblers in the early days. I, really started to question, could I do it? I made mistakes. I made decisions too quickly. I didn't get consensus correctly because I wasn't used to the cultural dynamics, but I learned a lot. And once I got over the initial kind of 6 months and I started to listen, learn, observe, that was the making of me as a leader. And I was able then to take all my good operational skill sets and knowledge and take all of what I was learning, all that great stuff that I was learning in the early days of my new role, and I was able to match that as an opportunity. And that's what made me then really excel as a leader because I had the experience and the background, but then I also had that ability managing teams cross-culturally. And that's a phenomenal skill, a skill that often we underestimate and overlook when it comes to recruitment processes because everyone's so different, cultures are so different. To have an asset in your team that's able to really understand cultures and manage teams, high-performing teams within that, it's a huge asset. So I saw that through the hard days, and I really started to lean into really enhancing my skills of managing cross-cultural teams, and I used that and leveraged that to my advantage. And then I started to believe in myself a bit more. My kids were starting to settle in really well. Our life was starting to settle in really well. And I started to look at how can I build my career further. So I first started as a department manager, an operational department manager, and I had a scope of growing an international team. And then I moved very quickly into a managing director role for Spain, and I managed sites, large sites across two parts of Spain, across Malaga and Alicante. I spent a lot of time on the road, and it was so exciting, and I learned so much. And then COVID hit, and it's fair to say, even though I have a HR background, I didn't have experience of labour law in Spain. And labour law in Spain is different to what I had been used to. I didn't have a lot of experience of dealing with unions because the industries that I'd worked in Ireland weren't actually unionised. So I had a lot to learn, and I learned a lot, especially when COVID hit, and unfortunately companies went through challenges working from home, and inevitably companies experienced some loss. So I had to learn a lot through that experience, and I think that tested me a lot. And I would say that I experienced burnout during that period, absolutely. I questioned myself a lot in terms of myself and my skills as a leader and whether I had the right skill set to be able to lead that company to where it was going. And then after that, it was fair to say I needed a change. So it was either, okay, branch out and go out on my own, because I always had a dream to go out and do like HR and leadership consultancy on my own, or pivot within the organisation. And I had an opportunity at that time to pivot in the organisation and move more into a specialised HR space within, again, an international team. And I took that opportunity and I moved into like a people director, CHRO type of role within a multicultural team with the responsibility for HR, recruitment, comms, communications, internal engagement. And it was an amazing role and I loved it. But I think that for me at that point, I hadn't recovered from that burnout and the personal challenges. I would say I was definitely a workaholic that I had experienced during COVID. And although I did very well within that role for 18 months to 2 years, I felt then a real urge that I needed to explore something different. My kids were getting older. I felt that my values were changing as a person as I was getting older. And I was tired of being the mum that didn't see my kids. I was tired of feeling like I was chained to my desk. I never was able to really go to kids' shows and after school events and really be able to switch off because my job was so demanding and I felt like I always had to be available. I was that person that went on vacation and said, call me if you need me, call me for anything. And then I would be surprised and frustrated and angry when I was disturbed 40 times during my vacation. And that was normal for me, but that started to take a toll on me personally. It started to take a toll on my life, who I was and my family. And I started to really kind of look at myself as a mother and observe, is this what I want? Did I bring my kids into this world and build this life for us in Spain and I can't enjoy it? People would come over and visit us during the summertime and they would be out and having great times by the beach and by the pool, and I was never available to enjoy that experience with them because due to my own failure, I was not equipped with the skills of setting boundaries at work. And I felt like that I always needed to be available, and I validated myself by how hard I worked. So the harder I worked, the more validated and seen I felt as a human. So there was a lot going on there, I would say, for myself. So this was me reaching, a very senior level, a C-level role within an organization, an international organization with a base in Spain, working predominantly remotely, traveling potentially once a month, and supporting a very dynamic organization. And I'm forever grateful for that role, but I was changing as a person. So in 2022, early 2023, I was massively changing as a human. And I realized that what I needed and what I wanted from my life I couldn't really push it down anymore. That voice started to become louder and louder. So I made a decision to train as a coach with the International Coaching Federation. I decided to start coaching mainly women in leadership roles, and I started to get some consultancy work, which was great. And that was a great time in my life, because not only was I learning about me, I was also able to support women through their career. Then I did some consultancy work, which was wonderful. And then we started to become more and more involved in our family business. Up until that point, I had this thing about my identity is my corporate role and the real estate business is Warner's. And I refused really to kind of cross over the paths. You know, my lane was my lane, his lane was his lane. But lo and behold, life has a different plan and a different direction. And the family business started to become busier and busier. And there was really a need to support Warner with streamlining the operations, with the marketing, with the branding. There was really a need to start taking more of that on, because I suppose I had failed to really understand how much he was doing alone. So I became more and more immersed in our family business, which was great. And I guess that's what got us to where we are today, running a successful real estate business, chart-topping podcast, online resources and courses, supporting our clients and customers in a different way. That's how we got to where we are today. I am so grateful for the career that I have been able to build in Spain. And I didn't listen to the begrudgers. How did you get a job like that? You don't speak the language. Oh no, you can only work in bars or restaurants in Spain. It's impossible to build a serious career. Look, I've just walked you through what my career looked like in Spain. You absolutely can build a serious career in Spain. And remember, when I moved over in 2016, remote work wasn't a thing. We didn't really have the exposure to the digital nomadic life and ways of working that we see now. We have COVID and post-pandemic to thank for that. So even now, it's even easier than it was back then. So if I was able to do it, you can do it too. I get asked all the time, do you need to speak fluent Spanish to work in Spain? You don't, but you need to be learning the language and be seen to integrate. And if you don't have Spanish and it's going to be a period of time before you build up your acumen with the language, you need to be very selective about what type of company and role that you're going to do. So that requires some the ball research from you up front, where you're really able to look at international companies that you might have a good skill set match for. You need to do that heavy lifting and that homework up front. But if your plan is to stay in Spain long term, yes, language is mandatory, but it shouldn't deter you from exploring employment opportunities in Spain earlier on, because there are options. You just need to take the time to look for them and find them and explore them. How do you even find proper jobs here? That's not just bar work. Yep, you need to make a project. So you need to get online. You need to start researching what companies are out there that match your skill sets, that could be a match for you. You need to start familiarizing yourself with job portals like Indeed. You need to get your CV ready, your cover letter ready in the same way that you would job searching in your home country. You need to get on LinkedIn. You need to start putting yourself out there, and you need to start making new connections and potentially networking with LinkedIn up front, okay, so that you can start to talk to people that have already done it and start to understand how is it done over here from a job search perspective. What's normal in terms of presenting your CV? Do they put photos on their CV? How do they normally structure those common parts of applying for a role? So it's about understanding all of that and familiarizing yourself with how things are done. I'll always remember this story. An Irish contact contacted me one day and said, I have all of the skills for this role, but this company is just not even replying back to me. What's wrong? So I said, give me a look at your CV. Let me have a look at how it's structured. I have a lot of experience with CV screening and interviewing because of my HR background and running recruitment teams. And what I noticed was that she had a very traditional Irish name. So anybody that's familiar with Irish names will know that they're not always easiest to pronounce, and how they actually sound is not always how they are spelled. And unfortunately, that person hadn't expressed on their CV how their name was actually pronounced. So when the recruiter came to actually screening the CV and picking up the phone, they couldn't pronounce the name, so they skipped over it. So there's things that you need to think about that you maybe don't need to think about in your home country. So talking to people who have walked the path before you, talking to people who have gone through applying for roles in maybe some of the companies that you're applying for or in the areas that you're applying for, connecting with them and asking them, how are things done? And getting that information and that support up front, that support will be invaluable to you as you start to commence your job search as well. And people ask me these questions because they genuinely don't know where to start. And I get it. I didn't know either. But the one thing I will always love about Spain and being down here in the Costa del Sol is people are so open to support you, especially the expat community that have made the move before you, because likely they've probably encountered challenges that you're going to encounter and they wished that they had some support at the time. So they want to support you to succeed. So put yourself out there and ask people, because in my experience, people are good over here and they want to help you, and they'll come back to you with maybe a starting point that can support you to get on your way. So early doubts and setbacks, what I learned, definitely, as I've said, not having the language up front, depending on the type of role that you're applying for. If you're applying for a role that doesn't need Spanish in an international company, that's great, apply for the role. But be conscious that you will still have Spanish colleagues in the lunchroom that you'll be working with. And if your plan is to stay in Spain long term, learn about their culture, learn about their life, ask for their support with learning the language, put yourself out there and get to know your colleagues. So don't cut yourself off. Be open to experience culture from their map of the world, from their lens of the world, and show them that you're interested in their culture. Ask about their traditions, ask what they're doing for their vacation periods. Show them that you're integrating and learning the language, and ask for their help with it. Ask them to talk to you in the canteen. Ask them to support you if you have some homework from your classes. They will love to help you, and they will love even more that you're interested in getting their support. Let's be clear on that. Like, depending on your role, the language may not necessarily be required for your application, but from an integration standpoint and from your successful integration to Spain, if your plan to stay in Spain is long term, yes, you're going to need to learn the language for that. That's important. So early doubts and setbacks for me were absolutely the language. That's absolutely it. And that would be my advice around that. Don't let it put you off in terms of the application process, okay? But do learn it if you have an intention to stay in the country long term. I would say as well that I was 30 years of age when I moved over, and I thought as a leader that I had an amazing CV, which I did. I had managed some incredible departments and in some incredible businesses, and I had been exposed to a lot throughout my career, which made me an asset for organisations, and I totally understand that. But I would say, looking back, I was probably a little bit cocky. I thought I had all the answers, and I didn't, particularly when it comes to integrating in a company that is multicultural. And it makes it even more complex when you have to manage a team with multiple nationalities. You have to take the time to understand the nationality, to understand how they view communication, how they view hierarchy, how they view decision making, how they like to be supported, how they like to be communicated with. And I think that because I was kind of used to a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of the teams that I'd managed, the departments I'd managed previously were usually of the same culture. They'd come from the same neck of the woods. So I was used to a different approach, but that tested me, that shook me. So I think I probably entered into my career in the early days in Spain a little bit naive. I assumed that my approach that had always worked back home would also work in Spain, and that was not the case. So my advice on that would be listen. Don't enter in assuming that you have all of the answers. Be prepared to learn and take your time, okay? Because things will not be done the same as what you're used to, and you need to show your new colleagues that you're taking the time to respect that, appreciate that, and understand that. So that was a huge lesson for me. I needed to kind of come down a peg or two and really evaluate my leadership skills, because in my new territory, they weren't as good as they were previously. That was my biggest lesson. And that's what stood to me a few years down the line. That's what made me a great leader, because I learned those skills and I learned them the hard way. You don't need to have all the answers before you make the move. You need to begin. But what you do need is you need the belief that you can do it. You need the belief that you're not going to be thrown off every time something is hard or something becomes difficult, because it will be hard. Let me tell you that. Integrating and building a career in a country that you've never lived in before, that you don't speak the language, you're probably an element of homesickness is creeping in on top of you as well. That's hard. So you need to have the grit and determination and the self-belief to not be thrown off every time there's a hard day. That's going to be very important for you as you start to build a career in a foreign country. But remember that you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to have determination, belief, and a vision. It's important as well to remember that opportunities exist. So you'll be building your career in the same way that you'd be forging out a career in any other country. So you'll be building stakeholders in the same way. You'll be building allies in the same way. You'll be networking cross-departmentally in the same way, because you'll be building a network that advocates for you as you start to build your career. So don't be short-sighted with that. Build your career and network in the same way if you are considering advancing in your career. Use office politics exists, whether you're in Spain, whether you're in the States, whether you're in Ireland. Office politics exist in every environment. And don't be naive like I was in the beginning and shy away from office politics and see people that are politically astute in the office arena. Don't see them as challenging individuals. Learn from them and observe, because there's opportunity to grow based on what you're observing from them. You would need to build allies in your network, whether it's in Spain or in another country, and removing yourself away from that arena and hiding from it and viewing that as challenging is not actually always politically smart. And it's important to understand that not engaging in that arena actually can inhibit your career. If your plan is to move to Spain in the next 6 to 12 months, start now. Because honestly, if I'd waited to speak the language, if I'd waited to have the perfect plan, I would still be waiting all those years later. What mattered most was showing up. What mattered most was letting people see me, connect with me, and get to know me. What mattered most was being vulnerable. What mattered most was my own self-belief and my own vision that I could make this work. If you want to work in Spain and you want to build a career in Spain similar to your home country, I would start by encouraging you to get on the job portals. Start looking at portals like Indeed. I would say to you, get your LinkedIn up and running, make your short list of companies that are in the area that you want to work for and you want to apply for roles with. Start connecting with employees that are working in those companies and start to understand what the job application process looks like for those companies. Make your career application strategy and have different touch points on that strategy and little goals that you can start to do now from your home country, that you can start to put the legwork in now. Don't wait until you get to the country. That, in my opinion, is too late. Start now. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, I have been very lucky to build a great network here in Spain. And that network also includes recruiters and professionals that have supported me on my career in Spain, but people that have also become amazing friends. And because I get asked a lot from our listeners, how do I actually apply for a job in Spain? What do I actually do? One of my amazing colleagues and friends, Serena Faithful, who is a senior recruiter in an international company here in Spain, has decided to come on an episode very soon and share her years of professional experience about being a recruiter in Spain and what makes your CV stand out, and that best practice insight that you should think about now if you're starting to apply for roles in Spain. So if your plan is to move to Spain and start applying for roles and building a career, this is an episode that you absolutely will not want to miss. And I'm really excited to bring this to you. This episode is a must listen for anybody who is starting their job search in Spain. So if this episode has spoke to you and you're thinking about bringing your career to Spain, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a message on Instagram or pop us a WhatsApp message through the link in the show notes. I just want to hear if you found this beneficial, if hearing my career story has inspired you and you were concerned and putting your job search off because you were waiting for that perfect time, you were waiting to speak Spanish perfectly. I hope this has spoken to you. And lastly, don't forget to follow so you get notified any new episodes when they go live. Thank you for listening, and ciao for now. Thank you so much for listening into today's episode on the Costa Property Podcast. Another fantastic episode learning about the highs and lows of relocating to the Costa del Sol from real people who have been through the journey themselves, and of course our wonderful experts. If you have been enjoying the show so far, remember to hit subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating or review.
We absolutely love hearing your thoughts. Please send any questions that you would like us to answer on the show to warner@wlcostaproperties.net. Or you can pop us a message on our socials, which are in the show notes. Remember, you can also visit the website, www.wlcostaproperties.net.
See you on the next episode, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.